7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome back to Taylors of EV live on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you tuning in. I really enjoyed yesterday's stream. I had life stuff going on, and I had to get going, so I wasn't able to stream longer. But I had so much fun yesterday because you guys were asking just like really fun, interesting questions, and I was like, why don't we do more of these? Because for those who don't know, Taylors of EV is not the only Taylors of channel I maintain. This may come as a shock to some of you, but I recently started streaming on my Taylors of Tech YouTube channel pretty regularly, and it's been going fairly well. I mean, there was a lot of people telling me that it would be bad for the algorithm, and that could not be further from the truth. If anything, it has helped my channel grow more so. And at worst, it has had no effect on channel views and performance and that type of thing. So I was like, okay, if it's going well for tech, why not do it for EV? Because I almost feel like there's more speculation and more fun subjects to talk about in the EV space. So I guess what I'm trying to say when I'm starting this EV live stream is that expect me to go live more often, more regularly. I'm not willing quite yet to commit to twice a week or 3 times a week or something like that. I'll probably just start with maybe once a week, maybe Wednesdays. We'll go live every Wednesday or something like that. Or, you know, it's not a super strict hardcore schedule I want to stick to, but still, it's something I want to try doing. And, you know, obviously if life gets busy and I can't keep up with it, then you'll know, okay, Drew's probably just busy. But, yeah, thank you, Space Dino, for tuning in. As Snyder V7 says, Tri-Motor Cybertruck gang, where y'all at? There's probably... I'll go out on a limb and assume that most people who reserved a Cybertruck probably reserved the Tri-Motor. I could be wrong, but I noticed, like, immediately after the... Elon was reporting in on the stats, he was saying that it was like 40% dual motor, 40% tri-motor, 20% single motor. And I bet because the Cybertruck is delayed, now people are going to have more money to save and work their way up towards getting a higher tier Cybertruck. Plus, like, the value of that trim is just so unbeatable, especially when Mike, moderator Y Mike in the chat, he can attest that even like gas pickup trucks struggle to get substantially over 300, 400 miles of range sometimes. So if you can get a lower cost of ownership, far more durable, far more acceleration, 500-mile range electric pickup, then yeah, the value of that just really cannot be beat by any other pickup, which is pretty awesome. Oh, yeah. I remembered what I was going to announce. So similar to what I did over on Taylors of Tech, we do these live streams pretty regularly, and if you miss them, because obviously, like Mike said himself, he has staff meetings when I tend to go live, or you guys are busy for whatever reason when I do go live. For one, you'll be able to rewatch them. They're still on the channel publicly, so you can go back and listen to them like a podcast. But what's even better than treating a YouTube video like a podcast is, oh man, I grabbed the wrong link. One sec. A podcast album itself. So I'm working on getting these up on Apple Podcasts, but for now I only have them on Spotify. So I'll drop that link. It should be the first link in the description of this live stream, but it is also a link I just dropped in the chat. So if you want something to play on your way to work or just a little audio background stuff to tune into, Taylors of EV Streams is now official on Spotify, and it's on its way to Apple Podcasts. So I don't have a link for that yet. We've got to go through this Apple approval period. Man, doesn't Apple suck? I mean, I don't know why anyone likes them. But yeah, the old EV streams that I've did in the past, even the very first time I went live on this channel, I've turned that into an audio format, and it's now available on Spotify and soon to be Apple Podcasts. That first live stream was June 23rd of 2020. I believe that's when I actually met Model Y Mike, was through that stream. So I was like, hey, that live stream worked out pretty well. Now I've got lifelong friend because of it, so let's see how many other friends I can make by going live. Anyway, I'll get into the chat here. But anyway, I'm just super grateful for you guys' support. members and just watchers or people who super chat. Anyway, it's a fun job, and I enjoy every minute of it. So appreciate you for your support. But anyway, let's get into it. Edith Shamil says, if you got a Rivian R1S for free, would you keep it or sell it and buy a Model Y? Ooh, see, this is what I'm talking about. Oh my God, you guys have good questions. I really like the Rivian R1T, or sorry, R1S as well. Actually, I like the S more. It's pretty practical, and it fits a demographic that I think doesn't have a very present EV market currently. There's not a lot of full-size SUV electric options right now. Like most of the electric crossovers out there are 5-seaters. And with the Model Y, you kind of like just barely have a 7-seater, but not really. And I like the design of the R1S. I like the range. The price is my only issue with it, is that it's just a tad too pricey. You know, I think the only thing that would keep me going back to the Tesla is likely the supercharger network, but that's rumored to be, not rumored, it's from Elon, which means we don't know about the timeline on it, but it'll probably happen eventually. I think as long as I could use the R1S on the supercharger network, I would probably just keep that. I think it's more practical. I think the design looks great. Well, maybe I shouldn't say more practical. They're both pretty practical. You know, I was just thinking about this. I've been going on mountain biking a lot more regularly, and the R1S would kind of be great for that. I just wanted to pull up the webpage here now just so I can get a good look at it. Yeah, you got the roof rack. I'm sure it's got a tow hitch. 300 plus miles of range. That's plenty for me. Also, I love this interior. I love the fact that they went with the landscape display like that, which is great. I think I saw on Twitter as well that Rivian had some picture somewhere that they were going to have something similar to Sentry mode. The door handles look cool. I like the light bar. This is also your charging indicator. When you're charging your Rivian, it'll turn green and it'll work its way across. And the other thing I like about it is the 7-seater is no extra money. So you can choose 5-seater or 7-seater. It doesn't impact the price of the car. And it looks fairly roomy back there. Up to 108 cubic feet of storage space. I think that has the Model Y beat. Obviously, this is much more expensive than the Model Y, so that makes sense. But, man, I need to find that picture. Basically, I think Rivian has their own version of Sentry mode prepared, which is just another one of those really cool like Tesla features that I'm kind of shocked no one else on the market has come up with yet. I'm scrolling through Twitter right now because I'm trying to find that Rivian photo, but I know it exists. I think, yeah, that's a really good question. I'm curious what your guys' answer would be. R1T or R1S. If you could have that for free, would you sell it for a Model Y? And if so, explain why, or maybe just we should ask ourselves if people would prefer this if it was equal price to the Model Y. I don't know. Yeah, the tweet's so old I can't find it. Anyway. Yeah, good question, though. Thank you. Let's see. Model 2 thoughts, price. How will it be differentiated from Model 3? Made in China or made in U.S.? Any guess on timeline? So, yeah, that's definitely the Tesla on the top of my mind a ton of the time, because I keep thinking to myself how the prices of Teslas seem to keep going up these days with the chip shortage, and probably inflation has something to do with it as well. But can Tesla get a vehicle down to $25K? I definitely think it will start in China. I think that the operating costs of a factory are way cheaper there, and obviously Tesla has a strong partnership with CATL with the iron phosphate batteries. That partnership is so good that they're willing to ship those iron phosphate batteries over to Fremont and build cars with batteries that way, even though I'm sure there's a bit of an import fee to moving all those batteries over to the United States, but that should say a lot about how cheap the batteries are. And obviously, like, you don't have to pay people as much in China. You can argue the ethics of that, but you know, the margins there are better. They can get prices lower in China. They can also move things quicker. That's probably the other thing, is like they just ramped up Giga Shanghai really, really quickly, much faster than Giga Texas ramped up or Giga Berlin ramped up. Giga Berlin is like dead last when it comes to how long it took to get a factory operational, because it still technically isn't, but they broke ground on that thing in like November of, well, maybe they didn't break ground, but they like acquired the property in 2019, very end of 19. And Giga Shanghai was like up and running within a year. It was like a big mud field. 12 months later, Model 3 rolls out. So I definitely think not necessarily that they will build them in China and then ship them to the United States. I don't know if they'll. I don't know. I guess they could do that, but my gut prediction is that they won't, because the Model 2 is probably going to be a compact, like a pretty small vehicle. My imagination of it is just basically imagine a Model Y shrinked down. It's like the same general footprint of a Model Y. I've got a picture of one in here that I can use as a reference. I know some of you don't know what a Model Y looks like. No, actually, it's got some design cues on it that I think are kind of helpful. So a lot of people, when the Model Y came out, were confused because they were like, why doesn't Tesla make this a full-size SUV and have it, more R1S-like and make it all boxy on the back? That way you're, like when me and Mike tried to fit in the third row of the Model Y, you guys, if you remember that video, we were scrunched over like this, and basically the third row is only good for kids. But the reason Tesla did that is because aerodynamically you can improve your range quite a bit when you have this slope go down real gently and you don't have a giant steep drop off on the back here. And I think the Model 2 is basically going to be this type of similar design, probably move the front end of the vehicle up a tad more, so you're probably going to compromise on trunk space. I bet it'll be lower overall than the Y, and you're not going to have as much wiggle room back here for storage and stuff. So the back end of the car will be more around here. The headroom won't be as good. It'll probably feel like sitting in a Model 3 interior-wise, but I predict it'll still kind of be a hatchback. It's just that they want to get that slope down to improve aerodynamics, and obviously the wheels will be real cheap and crappy and move all this a bit up. But overall, I think that the main compromises of the Model 3 is just mainly that it's going to be iron phosphate only. I could be wrong on this, but my prediction is that because we've only seen iron phosphate batteries work in rear-wheel drive vehicles because the batteries take up a lot of space, there's going to be very few configurations for the Model 2. It's just going to be all rear-wheel drive, all one range option. There's not going to be a standard range and a long range and a performance. I think it's just going to be one range trim, only rear-wheel drive, and that'll still be pretty fast because it'll be a relatively light car compared to the Model 3, but less practical. I wouldn't be shocked if they take out things like the frunk or substantially less trunk space. So kind of the people who sit in the second row, there's not going to be much area behind them, and that helps get the price down. And I think, honestly, if they come out with a 25K model, there might not be a ton of purpose to a standard range Model 3. Like, it's slightly more practical, but I think the range will be around the same. Maybe a little worse because the Model 2 will be smaller and it won't need as big a battery to go as far, so they might be able to improve the range a bit. But I think they could build that in China primarily, maybe end of next year, depending on how quickly they can ramp up. But yeah, I don't think that compacts sell as well in the United States as SUVs and pickup trucks. So that's why I think Giga Texas in the United States is going to prioritize Model Y ramp and Cybertruck. And compacts in general just are not top sellers in the US, so that we're probably going to get it last. Basically, I think Giga Berlin is going to ramp up Model Y starting in the next few months, and it won't be at like volume production until next year. And once Model Y has been ramped in Berlin, end of 2022, then they're going to start construction on the Model 2 factory line. Again, we don't know the name. I'm just placeholder for now. But I think Berlin will realize that the compact hatchback will be very practical in the European market. And I know some people have the belief that Tesla's going to design a completely different type of 25K car for each demographic. I look at their past choices and I feel like Tesla doesn't seem to have much interest in redesigning vehicles for different markets as much as I think people assume they do. I've seen a lot of people say, like, yeah, they'll design one that's good for China, and they'll design one that's good for Europe, and one that's good for the... They're doing the Model Y in all these places, and they're practically the same in every demographic. I mean, there's probably very tiny differences in the software, and they put a slightly different badge on the back, but overall, the general design trend of the Y, whether it's in Shanghai, whether it's in Germany, whether it's in the United States, it's all pretty much the same. And I think Tesla knows that that helps them save on manufacturing costs, and that helps ramp the production process faster, because every little change to the body or the exterior or even the interior, all those little changes, they have to contact different suppliers, and they have to find different ways of making that work for them. And I don't think they want to bother with that. So I could be totally wrong here. Maybe they do want to design it differently for each demographic. But my guess is Model 2 between Shanghai and Europe will be pretty much the same. Let's see. How about the new salt battery from CATL? I've heard a little bit about it, but it sounded mostly theoretical, or still in the R&D stage, maybe I should say. Not exactly theoretical, but once they start getting them in vehicles and they actually have some data to report on, then I'll probably have more interest in it. I don't know much about it right now. Let's see. Why would they wait to ramp up Model Y? They could do it while ramping up the production. It will just take much more manpower. Well, I think the problem is right now the construction crews at Giga Berlin are working on the 4680 cell production plant, which is part of the process of ramping Model Y. You got to get the battery cell facility up to the rate you want Giga Berlin's to be, up to the rate you want Model Ys to be cranked out at, and it might take them a while before they can actually, it might take them a little bit before they can actually get 4680s built from Berlin going into 4680 structural pack Model Ys. There's probably a tad bit of overlap where they can be working on construction for the Model 2 section of the facility and be ramping 4680 at the same time, but keep in mind this is Germany, so everything's moving much slower. much slower. Let's see. Speaking of aerodynamics, check out the Bollinger B2, only $125,000. I know exactly what you're referring to. I have heard of Bollinger, yes. Maybe there won't be a glass roof, so Model 3 will still be more premium. I have considered that, but I think we mentioned it on the podcast once, and Nick said something along the lines of, I don't know if the glass roof actually saves much, or if the glass roof actually costs much. So switching to an aluminum body involves a lot more paint. It's a whole other section of the car that you have to apply, some type of structural integrity to, whereas the glass is a lot more durable. That's a common misconception I've run into a lot. People think that the glass roofs are more dangerous. It's like on traditional cars that just have the body roof, you notice like you can push those down with your arms. Yeah, those are not really strong at all. That basically just prevents wind from getting in the cabin. Other than that, it's not going to stop anything from landing on you. Whereas the glass roofs on the Model S's and 3s and Ys, those things are actually, they can hold quite a bit of weight. Let's see. How long do I think before Model X finally comes? Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't already. They've been spotted in all kinds of places. I saw another one this morning. Someone was left their dog in their Model X with dog mode on, of course, and they had the refreshed, I think it was a plaid version too. So yeah, they clearly have employees testing them around, which is what happened a few months before Model S deliveries begun. So yeah, I don't know why they haven't started yet. I'm guessing end of this year. I don't know if I'll go as far as to say like October. That's when they begin. I mean, obviously as soon as possible would be great, but I'm just worried that like if it's taken them this long to get the Model X refresh ramped, then what else could be going wrong that we don't know about? Vaxo says U.S. tends to prefer sedans over compacts. That's very true, especially if you just look around what people are driving. I do think that when the Model 2 does come to the United States, there might be not so much reason to have a standard range Model 3 anymore. Just for the same reason that there's not a cheaper Model S. There used to be, I can't remember when they took it away. It was a while ago. But they used to have 3 trims of the Model S, just like the 3, where there was like a cheap option, and then there was the dual motor, and then there was the performance. And now they've moved away from that, and they got rid of the rear-wheel drive option. So then all the Model S's were dual motor, and now it's of course dual and tri-motor. And I think similarly, the Model 3 is the base one right now. Like, that's the cheapest Tesla you can get. So it kind of makes sense to have a entry model, higher model, performance model, and obviously the margins on those dual motor options are much higher, so they kind of help offset the lower margins of the rear-wheel drive Model 3. But once you have an even cheaper model than that I honestly don't think we should even assume it's going to be $25K anymore, just because of inflation and how weak the dollar is now, and everything is in price going up. And my general ballpark is just assuming that it's sub $30,000. It might end up being more like $27,000, $28,000, but we don't know. Am I thinking of the 60 kilowatt hour battery? I can't remember. One of those, but basically there used to be a cheaper Model S, and then once the Model 3 came around, they got rid of that option. So I think you could have a similar thing happen when, okay, now there's a cheaper version. We don't need the standard range Model 3 anymore. So the Model 3 might just turn into dual motor and performance, and that's it. And if you want to go cheaper, you go with Model 2. Unless they just see a future in iron phosphate sticking around in the long term. I could, if they can get really, really healthy margins on the standard range Teslas, then maybe it makes sense to keep them around. But sub $30K would be $29,999. Yeah, it would not be $25K, but if you adjust for inflation, I would say it's actually pretty close. If you look at, all right, Tesla said there would be $25K vehicles, and now adjust for how the rate of the dollar has been impacted since Battery Day. Basically, I'm trying to say $25K doesn't mean what it used to mean. But I still think that's really good, considering the cheapest Tesla right now is $40,000. And once you factor in cost of, gas savings, that's pretty on par with the price of an average new gas vehicle. So if you got the price of an EV, a compelling one with self-driving and fast charging and decent range, over 250 miles, and you got that on a sub $30,000 vehicle, that's pretty tremendous value. Like, you could compare a gas vehicle of $30,000 and what the cost of ownership is over time. That thing's going to sell like hotcakes. Even if it's not $25K, it would still sell incredibly well. Let's see. Where do you think will be the next European Gigafactory? UK? I'm not sure. Like, I don't know why everyone is assuming United Kingdom. I don't know if it makes sense to build cars there just because it's an island and, there's a decent number of people living there. But the goal with Gigafactories for Elon was to find places where, for one, people want to live, because that was one of the issues with them ramping up the size of Giga Nevada, was they were hoping it would be much larger, but they couldn't get enough people to want to move out there, and there wasn't enough employees in the area to expand the production lines as much, which is why they're trying to think it through more with the Giga Texas. They were going around Fremont and asking everybody at the company, like, where would you want to move? Where would you guys be interested in moving if we had to put another Gigafactory in the U.S.? And they were like, Austin, Texas. That's like the number one option. And he said that when they asked everyone what their number two option was after Austin, they didn't have anything. No one had an answer after Austin. So they were like, okay, everyone seems pretty interested in Austin, so let's put a factory there because we can get a lot of people to move out there. So if you could convince enough people to all move out to the United Kingdom, maybe they'd be interested in it. But I think the other goal is to keep them fairly centrally located relative to population, not just geographically, but try to find places where there's tons and tons of people that are willing to work at a factory. And I'm just not sure if the United Kingdom fits well for that. It might, like, the cost of building a factory there might not be worth it compared to just importing those vehicles from Giga Berlin. I guess if there had to be a second Gigafactory, then yeah, probably UK would make sense, just because there's probably a lot of people buying EVs there, and you're going to have to put them on boats to get them over there from Berlin anyway, so you could probably bypass a lot of that process. But I don't know. It's just the population is much, much lower compared to the other places. China, over 1 billion people there. You got all of Europe, connected, and Berlin can service all of it. So, yeah. Is the update with Disney Plus still rolling out, or do you know how long we should expect? How long should we expect it? Yeah, I've seen some people getting it, but it seems to be a staggered rollout, which is kind of weird. Like some people have been getting the update and some people haven't. So I'm not sure exactly how long it's supposed to wait. I assume over the next few weeks it should eventually make its way out to everyone. But yeah, I wish I knew. Um, let's see. Yeah, Giga Iceland. That would be wonderful, huh? Let's see. Unless FSD will be more expensive long term than the car itself, I feel like FSD price will jump if they reach level 5, then get cheaper from there. Yeah, level 5 definitely. I actually think that it will jump many more times before they reach level 5. If they ever reach level 5, that's honestly a question in itself. But yeah, I do think that Tesla probably realizes whenever they can prove to the public that another impressive feature or another game-changing update comes out for full self-driving, that they can jack up the price, and that will likely cause a lot of people to buy it right away. Like, I wonder how many people are buying full self-driving now, like still with the beta only limited to a few thousand people, and there's not been a ton of changes to the public release in the past couple of years. Honestly, very little changes to the public release. And $10,000 for basically Smart Summon, Navigate on Autopilot. Like the way it stands right now is very much, I think most people would agree, not worth it. But once they roll out the beta button to the masses to where everybody can start having the car drive everywhere, then yeah, that's probably going to justify another price hike. So I would not be shocked if we see it jump to 12 or maybe even 14,000 by the end of the year, because they know that's a big feature. That's going to drive up the demand a lot. But once you announce a price hike, that's probably when they see the most amount of orders. Specifically, like saying, okay, the price will be $4,000 or $2,000 more in December or in the next couple of weeks. That's going to make everyone go, holy crap, I need to upgrade, because you know you're going to have an appreciating asset for sure. So you buy it, and you see the price go up, and then you feel like accomplished. You're like, yay, I got it at a discounted price. But in the moment when you don't know when the next price hike is, and we're just sitting around waiting for another update to come out, that's when it doesn't feel like there's much of a rush, or like, why would I pay it right now? Eric says, I bought FSD outright. I regret it on a 3-year lease. Yeah, that's who I feel bad for, is your demographic exactly. There were people who got it on a lease, and software was never ready within the lifespan of that lease. Do you think the subscription price will ever get a hike? Oh, yeah, it almost certainly will, because the subscription will make too much sense if it stays at $199 forever. And the price of buying it outright goes up. You're extending the amount of time it makes sense. Like, okay, now I would have to own the car for this long, or 5 years or 6 years before it would actually make sense to buy it outright. So my guess is the subscription price will change alongside the outright price. So when it jumps up to $12,000, subscription will probably jump up to $240 or $250 or something like that. Let's see. Has the outline of the Cybertruck on the side of Giga Texas been debunked yet? People see what they want to see. Yeah, I was confused by that as well. I didn't see what everyone else was seeing. They were like, there was just like an obtuse angle with the concrete siding on Giga Texas, and people are like, hey, they're drawing a Cybertruck, and I was like, I was just looking at it perpendicular from the highway, and it does not look like that at all. You had to look at it from a slanted angle so that the cutouts for the wheels and stuff looked a lot more compressed than it really was. And then suddenly they put up the siding and it doesn't fit the Cybertruck design at all, and everyone got real quiet. I didn't hear anyone say, actually, that might not be it, but yeah, that was funny. Cybertruck is just such a basic, simple design. You can see it anywhere. Like the little green pallets that showed up at Giga Texas, people are like, hey, they're slightly sharp and pointy on the side. That must be a Cybertruck. And then they unwrapped one of them, and it was just parts. I was like, yeah, this stuff kind of can accidentally look like a Cybertruck pretty easily, or at least an angle of a Cybertruck. I'm pretty sure we can rule that out as debunked. Joshua says, can you explain the levels of autonomy? There's actually a few different definitions, which is kind of confusing. Like certain people have different definitions than others. But to me, they're pretty straightforward. They're pretty standard. So level 1 is basically the basics. You've got like emergency safety systems that break if you get close to a car, or simple cruise control. Level 2 is where Tesla is currently. That's when a human has to pay attention the whole time, but the car can handle a lot of different features autonomously, which is why arguably the levels are not super helpful, because with the rate Tesla is improving and the way Tesla is growing their software and its features, it's still technically all level 2. This is why I've argued that it might be better to call them the 5 levels of liability instead of autonomy, because technically, if a Tesla on the FSD beta goes from point A to point B with no interventions, does the entire drive without you intervening at all, that was still a level 2 system, because it required you to pay attention the entire time. It required you to have your eyes on the road. It requires you to keep your hand on the wheel. It's more of a liability differentiating factor. Level 3 is when a human driver is still required, but there are circumstances where they can not pay attention. Typically, I think for more than a few seconds, obviously. But if you're in a situation, and these are pretty rare, I don't see, level 3 is kind of a weird one, because it's like the human has to be there, but the human can stop paying attention, which is a weird place for an automaker to put a self-driving system, to be like, let's have someone there to make sure they can take over at any time, but there are certain situations where they don't have to look around. So basically, I think there's one company out there that has a self-driving system where you don't have to look at the road or keep your hands on the wheel if the car is under a certain speed. So they consider it level 3, because it's good for like stop and go traffic. If you're like stuck in a really, really big backlog of cars, then that means your car's not going very fast. It's just kind of occasionally accelerating and then slowing down and stopping. In those situations, you can check your phone, read a book, watch a movie. But then as soon as it accelerates past 25 miles an hour, that's when it requires you to pay attention again. So that specific system I would consider almost more of like a 2.5. It's not quite a 3 yet, but potentially level 3 would be if they rolled out the FSD beta to the entire fleet of Teslas, or anyone who paid for full self-driving, and said you don't have to pay attention, but you still got to be in the driver's seat. And the car most of the time is able to drive from point A to point B with no interventions, but there might be a few situations where you have to take over. And for that reason, legally, we're still going to have to put someone in the driver's seat. So the reason, I'm kind of against the level 3 definition, but I kind of get it, is because I could see Tesla becoming level 3 eventually, depending on how safe and how reliable the FSD beta gets. I'm thinking we might be able to hit level 3 sometime next year, which is when Tesla starts assuming liability. That's when they start saying, okay, we've proven this to be safe and reliable enough that you don't have to pay attention sometimes. But maybe they could do it just on freeways, which seems to be pretty good and pretty reliable. So they might get to the point where they're like, okay, the car can drive itself when you're on the freeway and you don't have to pay attention. You can watch a movie, you can be on your phone. But then once you exit the freeway and once you get back onto city streets, pay attention, keep your hands on the wheel, even if the car's driving itself. Basically, that would be level 3. Level 4 is where Google Waymo is, which is basically when the driver is optional. You don't need a driver in the driver's seat anymore, but it's limited by geofences. So that's part of the brokenness of the different levels of autonomy, is that Waymo can seemingly come ahead of Tesla because they get to say, hey, we're at level 4, Tesla's at level 2. But it's kind of an unfair comparison, because Waymo is working in very limited areas with pre-mapped roads, and they have shadow drivers sometimes, and they have people overseeing the computers to take over sometimes if something goes wrong. So technically, like, if you designed a car that can only drive within one city block and take people from one end of the building to the other, you've created a level 4 autonomous vehicle. So basically, there's very easy ways to abuse the different levels of autonomy to make it look like you're further ahead than everyone else. Because obviously you can record a video of you like, hey, people walk up to this car There's no one in the car. You get in it and it drives you somewhere, and you didn't have to do anything. You're not in the driver's seat. They've been doing that in Chandler, Arizona, because the roads are very wide, very clean. It's good weather, very straight roads. There's not much to it. So it's much less scalable. The idea of getting Waymo autonomous driving into more and more places, it's just going to take forever. Like, Waymo's been around for like a decade now, and they still only have level 4 autonomy when the weather is good. I believe if it starts raining, they have a driver take over, and they can't do it without a person. But when the weather's good, they can do it in like 2 or 3 cities. And I believe they're trying to roll it out into San Francisco now, but you have to be like a certified rider. Like, you have to get tested. And the vehicles for Waymo is like, I think, over $100,000 a piece. There's really, really expensive equipment on them. So it's just overall far less scalable than FSD. Whereas level 5 basically means no human required, no geofences, which is kind of vague in itself, because I don't know if that counts. Like, can the robotaxi drive off road and drive off into, you know, the mountains and the hills and do off roading? Like, I don't know if that should count, but basically anywhere that's public paved road, as long as it can drive autonomously wherever a human can, and there's not like a jurisdiction, it has to do it within city limits or something, then that's level 5. So that's what I think we have decades until we reach. Level 3 I could see hitting in the next few years. Do you think Elon is right about FSD public beta coming time-wise? I wouldn't trust him just because of the overly optimistic timelines he's given in the past. I would say assume end of this year. That's the running answer I've been giving everyone. I wouldn't say 4 weeks. I wouldn't say 8 weeks. I'd just say probably by the end of the year is when the beta button would be out there. Let's see. Car and driver article, path to autonomy. Yeah, I've seen other people have different definitions for them, but those are the 5 I've mostly referred to in my videos, and the 5 I hear most people referring to. Would you consider getting a Cyberquad if you can get it separately from the Cybertruck? I'd be kind of interested in how much it costs. I don't know at this point, but I don't know if I have much use for one. I mean, I don't have a huge property, but it sounds fun. I had a quad runner at my childhood home growing up, and we rode it around the property all the time. It was obviously much, much louder, but oh boy. Sorry, I forgot to put on the spam filter. Hold on a second. Details. Where is it? Yeah, this helps people not spam as much. Okay. I ordered a Plaid Model X, and they changed the delivery date from October to January, then to March, and then back to January. Kind of crazy. Yeah, I don't think they know what they're doing. I've seen, excuse me, I've seen a ton of people on Twitter that keep posting all of their delivery times keep changing. So I don't know who at Tesla is in control of that, but they're like, oh, actually it's doing well. Actually, it's not doing well. Actually, yeah, they don't know. I wouldn't trust those right now. I would just say, be patient, and I wouldn't be checking the delivery window very regularly, because I don't think it's super accurate. Waymo also stopped selling their LiDAR tech to other companies. They just killed all possibility of making LiDAR cheap, shot themselves in the foot. Yeah, I don't think LiDAR is the answer personally. I mean, I know some people disagree, but well, I think that there's more than one road to achieving autonomous driving, because, you know, if you just think of like the closed box scenario, you could theoretically get a lot of cities just with a lot of incremental HD mapping and bringing your vehicles into more places and say, okay, we've really got a solid 3D model of this city, and our cars have been tested and they're proven to work pretty reliably. You could get some other companies with autonomous driving systems that do a decent job that are not Tesla. But the cost is just going to be higher just because the vehicles are so much more expensive. So that cost per mile is probably going to be much harder to beat if Tesla does ever reach the potential of robo-taxis, where the cars just start driving themselves around all by themselves. But yeah, it's LiDAR's not helping with bringing the cost overall down. And I do think that with the amount of improvement we've seen with Tesla's vision-based AI learning, I think you can get just as good as Waymo, probably better, just with having a neural net in so many cars testing the self-driving software out on city streets and that type of thing. That'll take a lot of training and a lot of data management, and they'll be able to probably outperform. I think they did outperform Waymo. I think Omar took a Tesla with the FSD beta out to Chandler, Arizona, where they're testing Google Waymo, and he was able to get it to go in the same places with no interventions, and I think it did it faster than Waymo did it as well. Took less time. Let's see. Do you think Tesla will expand more into Eastern Europe when Giga Berlin is complete? Because right now there's not a lot of Teslas and superchargers, for example, in Poland. Yeah, that seems to be the plan. I think that they probably want to expand it in as many places as they possibly can, but just, yeah, all of the complexities of shipping and getting vehicles way out there. And, you know, they started building supercharger stalls at a factory close to Giga Shanghai. So once you have a permanent presence there and people working there long term, you know, you can see like the social media accounts and the management team is almost like its own separate company over in Tesla China. They have like a whole different brand, and they post videos of the factory, and they offer different things. And I think they had like a first party wrapping service or that type of thing. So once they set up a factory in a corporate presence in another country, they can typically start being more self-reliant and making decisions all on their own. So I could see Giga Berlin doing something similar so they can expand more into Poland and that type of thing. But yeah, you just got to get factories in the ground first. Tesla bot is in charge of the delivery dates. Yeah, that makes sense. Is the Rivian IPO a joke? Yeah, basically it's a joke. But I do think that I understand partially why the Rivian IPO is much higher than what most people think it should be. I do think that 80 billion is too high, but I understand why they're not going to IPO at the exact same price that Tesla IPO'd, because Rivian is going into a very different EV world with their first product compared to what Tesla was going into. You know, like buying stocks and wanting to buy into a share of a company isn't necessarily just about how are they today. You don't buy a stock because you expect the company to stay the same forever. You buy a stock because you see a company growing, turning into something more. And that's why a lot of people buy into Tesla stock. And many would argue, you know, Tesla doesn't deliver as many vehicles as Ford or GM or Toyota, but they are worth far more than any of those. But it's because people see a future in them. They see the potential of growth, and they see the potential of a company that will change everything. So I get it. I get why the price of Rivian's IPO should be probably much higher than what Tesla IPO'd at, or much higher than what people think it should be relative to the current market. It's like, well, Tesla's delivering this many now, so Rivian should. People probably are looking at Rivian and saying, you know, they've got funding from Ford, they got tons of money from Amazon, they've got a factory, they've got a product that a lot of people seem interested in, they've got the delivery van contract. So they just, of all the other EV startups outside of Tesla, they're probably looking at Rivian and thinking, these guys don't seem to be on their way to bankruptcy. These guys probably, of all the other EV startups, have the best chance of success. So if you're going to invest in another IPO, in another public offering, then Rivian's probably one of the safer ones, because it's like, okay, Amazon's not going to let them die, or they're going to work with Ford, and they've got money, they've got factories, and they're already looking at expanding factories, and they're building out their own charger network. So I could see why it should be relatively higher, but I agree 80 billion is probably way too much. I feel LiDAR should still be a thing in an emergency case when vision is temporarily impaired, aka massive splash of water over the cameras while on the highway. Yeah, the thing is, though, LiDAR is not good with water either. So if your cameras are impeded, more than likely LiDAR will be as well. Like, LiDAR doesn't work in the rain. It basically, the whole system stops working if there's bad weather. So Tesla is dealing with that, and they talked about that on AI Day, actually. They showed footage of, like, here's a real snowy day, and the snow is blocking a lot of the cameras, but with neural net training and visual kinetics, you can kind of, just like a human does, be able to estimate where a vehicle is, and just through the low amount of visibility you have, figure out where you need to stop and when there's objects too close to you. So I get the mindset of like it should be a backup. Back up is what I meant to say. But I don't think it actually would help much. And it does cost quite a bit, which Elon Musk talked about way back in Autonomy Day. And I think that's still the case. They probably already think their Teslas are too expensive. You know, they want to get them down under $30,000. They're like, yeah, we're not going to be adding LiDAR to these things. And Rivian is doing the same thing. When Rivian first unveiled their prototype, they said they would have LiDAR sensors. And now they've decided against that. And they realized Rivian was too expensive. They didn't want to go with they realized LiDAR was too pricey, so they removed all mention of it from the website, and now they don't plan on having LiDAR. Works fine in the rain. My 2014 4 Series has it. Even works perfectly fine with a motorbike in front of me. Well, I'd like to believe you, but Waymo needs a human to take over whenever it starts raining. The vehicles don't work autonomously when the weather is bad, so all I'm trying to say is if the cameras can't see, LiDAR probably won't see either. I don't think there's a situation where the cameras are impeded, but LiDAR is still fine. Logan Russell says, you buy now because you see the future and expect it to be higher. If it's already valued at its future value, then you should be iffy on buying until more news comes out to signal additional future growth. Yeah, I mean, it's a general safe stock market investing advice. Although Logan is not giving investment advice. It's all do your own research, of course. But ultimately, the community, the public decides what the value of something is worth. So if a bunch of us buy into Tesla stock because we believe it to be the future, even if it's not the case, that even if it's not true that they're justified of their current valuation, if we all bought into it, that's why the share is worth what it is. So similarly, if a ton of people buy into Rivian believing it's going to be higher and it does go higher, then, you know, we've put the value there. Let's see. Can you call Elon and tell him I'm still waiting for the long-range rear-wheel drive Model Y? Yes, exactly. I'll call him up right now. Man, that would be great. I wish it would. What would you guess is a reasonable yearly output for the Cybertruck in year 1 and year 2? If 500,000 orders will go through, it will take forever to build them. Yeah, I do think it'll take forever to build them. The main reason I think Cybertruck will be a big, slow rollout is because of just how many batteries it requires. It's such a large vehicle, and it has very high range. So the tri-motor Cybertruck is probably going to need a battery pack over 200 kilowatt hours. Maybe close to 250 kilowatt hours. So it's just an insane amount of 4680s. And that's probably the most heavily demanded model is the tri-motor because everyone wants the 500-mile range. So I wouldn't be shocked if the rollout is extremely slow. Maybe like year 1, year 2. I don't know. I don't look at the production output very well. I was thinking maybe like 50,000 in the first year. Like day 1, deliveries begun to 365 days from that delivery. I'm not saying they'll deliver 50,000 in 2022. I'm just saying 12 months after deliveries begin, maybe like 50,000 just because of how many batteries it needs. But second year, maybe 150,000. Maybe those are too generous or too conservative. I'm not sure. But I just know that compared to Model Y, which ramped very, very quickly, the Cybertruck's going to need a ton more batteries, and there's a ton of new manufacturing processes that they've never learned before. I think we have to keep looking at the Model Y as more of the exception to the rule. You know, it came out early. It came out with far better range than we thought, and the price was pretty on par. But the Model Y got to reuse so many components from the Model 3, and they already ramped it in Fremont, so ramping it in Shanghai was pretty easy, which I mean, because they get to carry over a lot of what they learned from Fremont, and then they get to carry over from what they've learned in Shanghai and Fremont to Texas and eventually Berlin. So I just think that the ramp of the Y should not be evident of what the ramp of the Cybertruck will be like, just because the exoskeleton ramp might be far more complicated than they expect, or armored glass, getting that to scale up. that's why I just imagine it being a big headache in terms of mass production. I genuinely think, like, if you haven't ordered a Cybertruck yet, there's a good chance you won't get one for like 4 or 5 years, just because of how back ordered it's going to be for a long time. Let's see. First time watching an EV stream. Just want to ask if/when will Tesla allow premium connectivity subscribers to use the Tesla as a hotspot for phones? I'd subscribe if that's available. I would love that. I think that's a great feature idea, but I don't think $10 a month would cover it, because if you started allowing other devices to connect to the internal modems of the Tesla, people could very quickly start live streaming, doing what I'm doing right now, connect your MacBook and doing really high bandwidth stuff, which is why on our typical cell phone plans, we have, cheap plans that are 4 gigs a month and more expensive plans that are 15 gigs a month, or really expensive plans that are unlimited data, and $10 a month for premium connectivity. I don't think Tesla is profiting at all on that. I think they're probably still losing a bit of money. If there's people that go on road trips with premium connectivity and are watching hours and hours of Netflix and YouTube, they're probably just assuming you're not using that much data, because you have to be parked and not moving to be able to stream high resolution content like that. But that does use quite a bit of data, and currently there's no data limit as far as I'm aware with premium connectivity. But I think that $10 a month just puts a slight dent in the losses that Tesla has to pay for all of that cellular connectivity. So if they started opening it up to laptops and computers and smartphones to be able to use that internet, they might have to jack the rates up. Unlimited isn't that expensive these days. It's much more than $10 a month, at least in the United States. I don't know. I know it's much cheaper in other countries, but in the US at least, cheapest unlimited plan, I believe, is like $30 a month. So even those plans typically slow down for hotspots after a certain amount of time. You only get unlimited data on the phone, and then once you go past like 30 or 50 gigs, then they start throttling the speed down more and more. So if they did open up the hotspot, they would need to come up with premium connectivity plus or super duper premium connectivity. Which might not be a bad business idea. My parents just got a 2021 Blazer, and it has hotspot for $10 a month, but I don't think it's unlimited. Yeah, I'd be very surprised if it was. I think Rivian allows you to use the car as a hotspot. Not sure how much the price will be, though. Yeah, well, with an expensive vehicle, they can probably just afford the loss on that. They pay monthly for that cellular data, but that's it. I don't get why Tesla isn't building more factories to prepare for everything that's coming. I mean, they have the money to do it. Yeah, I was having that conversation myself with Mike in the Discord. I was like, if they know they're going to have to ramp up 4680s further and they're going to have to build Model 2, why not work on those factories now? There's probably more to it than we realize. You got to hire people, and you got to find designated staff that you already have to go out and recruit more employees to work for you. And maybe the company is perhaps Tesla is already kind of stretching themselves out with Berlin and Texas, because, they do their best to go and recruit new people and new staff, and not just like employees that work on the manufacturing line, but also like engineering experts and people that are going to be able to manage tons and tons of people. They need to be able to hire those, and they have to designate people from Tesla internally to be like, okay, we need you to go move out to Austin, or we need you to go out and move to Germany and help set up this whole factory. It's not like there's just a giant crew of 500 people waiting in whatever country you want to start putting a gigafactory in. So it's possible that they're already stretching themselves out as far as possible. I mean, think about all of the employees they have working at Giga Shanghai, and all the employees they have working at Fremont, and then trying to send those people out to Texas and Berlin. Build it now, hire later. Yeah, I just don't know if it's that simple. I'm not sure if it's as basic as we need to just start building this thing, but don't really have anybody prepared to work there. I think there's certain amounts of oversight and manufacturing planning that goes out at each factory floor. It's not just a matter of concrete on ground, ceiling, wall. I don't think it's always that basic. I think that there's, especially if you guys keep up with Jeff Roberts and watch the videos of Giga Texas going up, they have to put all kinds of different foundational equipment in for Giga presses because they're so dang heavy. And there's all kinds of water systems and water recycling areas they have to design for because of how much water gigafactories have to use to ramp vehicles or batteries, and they're doing their best to make sure that water is recycled. But yeah, it might not make sense. This is what Downward Machine is saying. He's saying they're also waiting for raw material production to fill out, like the lithium clay mine in the Southwest, before adding new factories. That could be another issue, is that they don't have enough raw materials to really support more than what they already have with the current gigafactories they're working on. So it's like you could maybe build giant factories, but if the raw materials isn't ready, it's kind of unnecessary. But I agree. I have that question myself. I think it would be a good question for an earnings call. You know, they've got the money on hand. They're very profitable as of lately, so why not, like, if you know you're going to need more factories. I don't think there's room for Model 2 at Giga Texas. Seems like Giga Texas has become the fallback answer for where are we going to build everything. They're like, eventually we'll build Model Y there, we'll build Cybertruck there, then we'll build the Semi there, and then later we'll build the Model 3 there, and then we'll build the Roadster there, and then we'll build... It's like, I don't know if you've got the floor space. I'm just looking at the factory plan layout, you know? That Giga Texas takes up a lot... the factory already in its current size is taking up a lot of space, and I think... sorry for the lag. I'm still on Starlink, so sometimes it looks for a satellite. But anyway, I think that the main facility of Texas, Giga Texas, is pretty much just going to be good for Cybertruck and Model Y. Every second, Elon's answer. Austin. Right. Well, I was kind of getting... I'm kind of glad Elon's not going to be on the earnings call anymore, because it feels like every time we have an earnings call, we just have to hear Tesla say, mass production is hard. It's so difficult. It's really, really hard. It's so difficult. It's very difficult to emphasize how hard it is to mass produce a vehicle. It's like, okay, I believe you. I know it's hard, but you know, they say the same thing every call. Starlink has been unhappy the past few days. Yeah. They've been adding more people to the global number of Starlink customers, but they haven't been adding satellites. So I think that's the reason the satellites are acting up. They said they've shipped over 100,000. I think Elon said recently in a tweet they've shipped over 100,000 Starlink stations to customers. So basically, we have more customers on the same amount of satellites, and that's probably interfering with the stability of the connection. But they have new satellites, Generation 2 Starlink satellites that have laser sat communication, so that they won't need as many ground stations to communicate with. That should improve latency and stability, and those should be going out later this month. So they haven't done any Starlink launches in a while, but other than the live streaming, it's great. Like we never have any bandwidth problems when we're watching TV. 4K content is fine. I watch YouTube all day and there's no problem. I upload all my videos via Starlink and there's no issues. I use Discord all day. Like, everything else is literally like you couldn't even tell it was satellite internet. It works exactly the same way as land-based. The only time you notice it is this specific instance of live streaming, which it's slightly annoying, but it's not bad enough for wanting me to spend an extra $50 a month to get Comcast. Building the factory is one thing. Finding people to run it and maintain production is even bigger of an issue. Exactly. My guess is that's the answer, because I feel like my stupid monkey brain probably has the easy mindset of like, why don't you just build more factories, Elon? You've got the money. Go out there and start building more. It's like, that sounds obvious, so my guess is it's not obvious as an answer. Prediction about 4-week timeline for FSD. Is it really 4 weeks or is it 2 weeks? I think the FSD beta button will come out before the end of the year, and I would not trust anything Elon says about it. Unless he gets hyper-specific. He seems to be pretty good about that, like when he said the new FSD Beta 9 will drop on Friday at midnight. When you start saying things like that, that's when I'm like, okay, that's probably real. But other than that, I don't believe the 4 weeks or the 2 weeks thing. It's always wrong when he does that. But But yeah, I've been using Starlink as my only internet service since February. All of my EV videos, all my tech videos, all my live streams. My wife works online as well. She has an online job, and yeah, she hasn't complained at all. She hasn't had any issues with it, and other than the slight lag during live streams, it's been fantastic. I see your live streams partly to follow the progress of Starlink stability. It is improving as far as I can tell. Yeah, it was definitely much worse in February. Now it's starting to get worse again, I think just because there's more people on it. But like a month ago, it was probably at its best. I think like a month or 6 weeks ago, my live streams were dropping less than 1% of frames. Now it's on average back to like 3 or 4% of frames, which is less fun. Downtaker says, I'm hyped about the 25K Tesla, but how will they keep up with the demand when they have problems keeping up with their 50 to 130K cars? Exactly. I mean, that's part of the reason I think Tesla's vehicles likely could be a lot cheaper than what they're charging for them right now. It's just they're so back-ordered, there's no point in lowering the prices, because all that you're really doing when you lower the price of a product is encouraging more people to get it. That's kind of what Tesla says. That's why a lot of people joke about like, oh, there's no demand, they're lowering prices. But I think that's, Tesla wants to get vehicles out there as quickly as possible. So the ideal scenario, of course, is can you sell the vehicle profitably? Can you sell it affordably? And can you sell lots of them? It's not that helpful if you can sell it profitably and affordably, but you can only sell 10,000 a year. Doesn't really help the situation. Then you just have a huge influx of demand and you're back ordered for 5-6 years. So that causes problems. The I don't know if bandwidth is the right term. The output you can make those vehicles is just as tricky, and I think that's what's probably the biggest breakthrough with 4680 production, is that they're trying to find a way to be able to mass produce batteries at an insane rate. It doesn't even really have to be much more affordable, in my opinion, because I think that if you can get the output of vehicles higher, you can collect a smaller margin on each one. So basically, if Tesla is able to nail and figure out 4680 structural packs on the Model Y with the single-piece rear casting, single-piece front casting, I bet they could comfortably sell them for $4,000 or $5,000 less than what they're selling for now. And even at their current sales rate, they're back ordered till next year. They're like super high in demand. So if they lowered the price further, if they started getting those long-range Model Ys to 49,000, 48,000, 47,000, you would just have another huge influx of demand. But obviously, we don't have the output capacity at our current factories to be able to support that. So I think Warren Redlick has said this as well. So I'm not coming up with this myself, but I think that when Tesla unveils the Model 2, wherever they unveil it, it might be in California, might be in China, could be anywhere really. Wherever they decide to unveil it, I think the unveiling will have more to do with the factory than it will the product. I think that the product as itself will probably not be very interesting in an online presentation. It'll just be like, well, here it is. It's a little smaller than the 3. How do you sell people on your worst car? That's the question Tesla has to ask themselves when they unveil the Model 2. This will, by design, have to be the worst one. It's got to be the slowest. It's got to be pretty crappy in terms of storage, not as luxurious, not as premium. What are they going to do? Well, it has front heated seats. There's no powered liftgate. Like there will probably be far more questions when the Model 2 gets announced. That what does it not have? What did you take out from this vehicle that the other there will probably be a ton of people being like, does it still have the lumbar support? Does it still have rear heated seats? I'm guessing that the Model 2 is going to be huge emphasis on software packages. So instead of having a performance model and a standard range model, you're just going to have one trim, but then you could unlock more acceleration via performance upgrade. It'll cost you $2,000, but people will justify it as, well, I only spent $28,000 on the car, so I can spend another $2,000 and get a faster acceleration. That takes my 0 to 60 down to 4 seconds instead of 6.5. Giovanni says, not worst, cheapest. Well, Both. It's the cheapest, but that makes it also the worst. Technically, ignoring price, it's the worst Tesla. Like overall value, greatest package, yes, it'll be the cheapest, and I think it'll probably sell the best out of all the vehicles, at least in other countries. Maybe not in the United States. In the U.S., everybody loves to get in tons of debt and buy their big pickup trucks and SUVs. So Tesla unveiling the Model 2 will be like unveiling the 8th generation iPad. Yeah. That's a good analogy of it. Of just like, well, it still has the FSD computer. It's like, what does it not have? That's the question we'll be asking. So I think what's probably more interesting during the Model 2 unveiling is going to be talking about how they got the price down. It's like, it's going to be all about exactly how they either came up with a single piece casting, the front and rear is all one piece, structural pack with lithium iron phosphate in the cylindrical state, and like how they cram down the cargo space so it's not as practical. Because if you make something that's objectively better than the Model 3, no one's going to buy the Model 3 anymore. So especially if it's cheaper than the Model 3, and that we know that that's like the singular purpose of this vehicle. So I think the event will be all about factory wise, like designing a whole, I think Elon Musk talked about it. He was interviewed by Sandy Munro, and he said that right now all of their focus is going towards Texas and Berlin and getting those ramped, and of course figuring out how to mass produce the 4680 with extreme scale. That's where their focus is now, but he alluded to there being like a next generation factory coming after Texas and Berlin, and that factory is going to implement some even more game-changing tech that's going to help get the price down to $25K, that kind of stuff. That's a gorgeous house on the thumbnail. Thank you. There's all kinds of great solar roof pictures that Tesla has that I don't think enough people get to see, so I love using them for thumbnails. But if I'm going to be live streaming on the EV channel more, I'm probably going to need to find more creative ways of doing thumbnails. I think Tesla is raising prices in order to cut down on wait time since they can't increase production. Shortages are a typical consequence of imposing a price ceiling. Yeah, I think so too, based on how profitable Tesla has reported being, and the delivery numbers are still pretty good despite the shortages. I don't think they're raising the prices single-handedly just because the cost to make the vehicle has gone up a lot, although I'm sure because of inflation it probably has a little bit. The prices of everything have gone up, so I'm sure the components that go into Teslas probably went up too. But maybe they could discontinue Model 3 and replace it with Model Y and Model 2. I don't know. It's still it'll depend on how good the Model 2 is, because the thing is, a lot of Model 3 sales are not the standard range, especially in the United States. I've heard that the long range actually is the most popular option. So I could see the Model 2 selling well, but it might not necessarily overlap very much. It might not overlap very much with the market the Model 3 serves. Although I don't think that's a crazy suggestion, just because I think the Model 3 is a very dated engineered vehicle, like on the inside. Like, it doesn't have the single piece castings, and of course it's not ready for the structural pack. Technically nothing is, but the Model Y is getting the structural 4680s first, and Tesla's probably going to wait until they have 4680s in structural pack and the Model Y ramped, and they're mass producing that across 3 different continents. Then maybe they'll be able to spend the time on shutting down the Model 3 assembly line and updating it with 4680s and structural pack. I'm not sure if that's in the pipeline or something they want to think about, but yeah, if the Model 2 range is really, really high, like if they're able to get iron phosphate to 300 miles of range and they're still able to sell it for sub $30,000, and it's still pretty practical, if the Model 2 has a good amount of storage, it's still got the frunk, it's still got pretty good acceleration and that type of thing, I agree. That definitely will eat into the Model 3 sales quite a bit, which is why, like I said earlier, it might make sense for them to just scrap the standard range Model 3 and just say, if you want a Tesla cheaper than $50,000, or maybe with the 4680s and the structural pack, the long range Model 3 will be down to like $45,000, somewhere in there. Then they're like, if you want a Tesla cheaper than $45,000, then you got to go with a Model 2. I get that, but Model Y could get cheap enough. Model 3 wouldn't make sense. Possibly. I think there's technically a market for it. I think that if the margins on the iron phosphate standard range vehicles are really good. There's rumors of the standard range Model Y coming back, which I hope is true, with iron phosphate in the fourth quarter in the United States. There could be a decent number of people willing to spend however much that costs. It could be $45,000 on a Model Y, and the cost to make that Model Y is probably really, really low. So, yeah, I could see Model Y and Model 2 kind of bumping into Model 3 sales, and by the end of it, Tesla going, why do we need the Model 3? But it's hard to imagine right now just because the Model 3 is like the best seller. Like Model Y is going to overtake it fairly quickly, but it's still their best-selling. The Model 3 is still their best-selling vehicle. So speculating on when they're going to kill their best seller is kind of difficult to figure out. You know, the Model S used to be their best seller. Now, obviously, it isn't, but they still have it. There's still a Model S sticking around. Let's see. What do you think about the potential of lithium production from Seawater Sustainable? It's an interesting question. I don't know much about it, but I think that Tesla has some pretty interesting patents when it comes to filtering out lithium from dirt in Nevada, and they probably want to focus on that. Once you get into the ocean, there's a lot more chance for, like, okay, you got boats out there, boats have fuel, or you got a drill out there, you got plants out there. I don't know much about lithium production from seawater. There might be very sustainable ways to do it. I'll admit I don't know enough about it probably to formulate an opinion. There might be a real sustainable way to do it. I just don't know about it yet. Let's see. Which country will Tesla expand next? I'm rather optimistic about India. I think a lot of people underestimate the demand there. Yeah, I think that Elon keeps toying around with India. I was tempted to make a video on it, but despite the population being extremely high, the number of car sales is pretty dang low. I think they sell about 3 million new vehicles in India every year, which is, relatively speaking, not high. And the majority of India's vehicles that are selling are sub $10,000. So even if you got Teslas to $25,000, which I think they're going to struggle with personally, but even if you got them there and brought them to India, they would not sell in extreme volume. But I think importing them to the richer demographics of India from Giga Shanghai makes a ton of sense. They got approved to launch, I think, 4 different trims. We don't know which trims they are, but I'm guessing they're standard range Model 3s and Ys with iron phosphate packs from Shanghai. I could see those coming in just for the richer class in India, so that some people will be able to drive them around. It just won't be in extreme volume. But if you're able to get a factory there, it might make a ton of sense to get into energy storage and solar production, because India consumes a lot of energy and they have a lot of people, and they're trying to accelerate how much sustainable energy they use, just because there's a lot of pollution there and a lot of dirty energy that's still being produced. So I think there's a big potential for Tesla Energy to make a big impact in India. But yeah, it sounds like Elon's pushing the government to lower import fees and make it easier for businesses to come in there, but the Indian government's making it hard on them. So 1% of the world's lithium needs for EVs can be found in seawater. Huh. It's never really been attempted to be harvested. Recently, a study that is done supposedly successfully in Saudi Arabia that was able to harvest some. Okay. 1% doesn't seem like a lot. Maybe it is, but yeah, not too much. How many employees will work at Tesla once all currently under construction factories are completely done? Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. With Tesla bot, maybe 0. No. I think Elon said recently that between SpaceX and Tesla, they have like 110,000 employees. I assume Tesla probably has more employees than SpaceX, so maybe when all the factories are up and running, I would guess maybe 80,000. I could be way off there, but that's probably my go-to guess. Let's see. Just checked Starlink. It's $100 a month plus $500 in equipment. Please explain why you would buy that when other providers are cheaper and no upfront cost? Oh, I would love to, Victor. You're asking the right guy. So where I live, fiber optic is not an option. There's a monopoly by Comcast where I live. And guess what? Comcast frickin' sucks. I've heard countless bad stories from people in the chat about how terrible Comcast customer service is, and their rates are god-awful. So basically, I do a lot of uploading where I am because I'm a full-time YouTuber. This is my job. I do lots of live streams and I post several videos a day. And the fastest upload speed I could possibly get from Comcast was 40 megabits up. There's no other provider. Can't use anyone else. I don't live in a major city. I don't have access to gigabit up and down. And that price for just the 40 megabits up was $110 a month. So it's already more than Starlink, and $110 a month did not include unlimited data. And because I live stream a lot and my wife works from home and works on an online computer all day, we were going over the data cap that Comcast set, which is a terabyte, and they were charging us overage fees. So it was going way over $110 a month. And then we were just like, okay, the rates are way too high. With the overage fees, they would charge you an extra like $10 per 100 gigs you used. And we were using like over 2 terabytes and stuff. So basically all I remember was the Comcast bill was looking like $160, $180 a month. So we were like, how do we get rid of this data cap? And they said, well, you just have to pay for unlimited data through Comcast, which is an additional $30 a month. So now we're paying $140 a month. And guess what? We did that for a couple months, and then they started raising the rates for literally no reason whatsoever. Every month they increased it by like $2. So one month it was $142, $144, $146. Right before we canceled it, it was at $150 per month. And there was no sign of the speed improving or getting any better. And if I tried to downgrade my plan so that it would be under $100 a month, then the upload would be far worse than what Starlink is. So we weren't completely convinced we needed to cancel Comcast right away. You know, my wife was a little unsure about it, and I was explaining to her, you know, it's in beta, so sometimes it's going to be a little spotty. And it definitely was at first, in the first month or so. It was far more spotty than it is now. So we were a little unsure about it, but the speed was getting far better. And the upload speed with Starlink is pretty much on par with Comcast now. Again, the signal is a little bumpy when I live stream, but outside of that, I would never notice that I was on Starlink versus Comcast. The amount of time it takes for me to upload a video is the same. The upload is much more volatile. By the way, Comcast said I was getting 40 up. I never got 40 up. They were just straight up liars. Also, Comcast, their coverage, their speeds were not as advertised. With the plan I was paying for, I was supposed to be getting 1,000 down. I don't care about download, though, because I don't download much. The most amount of download I do is like watching 4K videos on YouTube or on TV, which you don't need 1,000 down for. I don't do gaming, so I don't have to download huge amounts of files all the time. All my job is all about pushing content up, pushing it all out. And the Starlink speed, there's no data cap with Starlink. The speeds are already getting better. I've watched it get better as I've been in the beta period. I love Spacex, so I would support Spacex regardless. If they had a Patreon page, I would probably sign up for it. And I also despise Comcast because of their customer service and how they forced us to get cable TV package. And if I didn't get Comcast with cable TV, they were going to charge me more for internet. So there's all kinds of just terrible business practices, and there was no incentive for Comcast to improve their coverage or not coverage, but speeds, whereas Starlink speeds are noticeably improving. And I believe once they get the laser satellites up, the latency will drop even further. The connection will improve. The uploads will improve. Elon said the end goal with Starlink is to get it back to gigabit. So I know that eventually I'll get gigabit anyway. Not that I need it, but other than the slight bumpiness in live streams, it's been fantastic. Dan says, move house if it's both of your jobs. I'm just going to pick up my entire house and move it somewhere else. If you mean live somewhere else, that is almost objectively going to be more expensive, just because we live in a pretty low-cost area, and We bought our house and paid it off, so we have no rent, no mortgage, and if we wanted to move somewhere else, especially with the price of real estate right now, oh my God, we would not be able to get a deal as good as we got on this house anywhere else. That's for sure. I just joined, but with Starlink, once when you go live or have video calls, I notice you drop service often. How often does that happen? It depends on the day. It's kind of temperamental. It's still technically in beta. I haven't had any issues with FaceTime, though, recently. I used to have more issues in the early days, but since then, I can go 3 or 4 hours on a FaceTime call and not experience any drops. The drops are just very quick now. If they do happen, they bounce right back. Yeah, I know. There's very different internet service depending on where you are in the world. Like, if you have 500 up or 500 down for $25 a month where you are, Starlink is not meant for you. The goal of Starlink is not to replace every internet service provider. Elon's been very clear about that. It's about bringing adequate internet to those who don't have access to it, or just providing cheaper internet. If you know about other other satellite internet options out there, they cost far more than Starlink does, and the speed is terrible. So it's a game changer for millions of people. They have well over 100,000 happy customers so far. I worded that badly. There's that much lithium in the ocean that 1% of it would satisfy the world's needs. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's much better. If we only need 1% of the lithium in the ocean, we would satisfy all of our lithium needs. Well, the more I've heard about lithium mining is that we're not going to run out of lithium, basically. Like, that's a false hypothesis some people had a while ago. It's like, EVs will never work. Do we even have enough materials for batteries? It's like, well, lithium's not the limiting factor. There's like a crap ton of lithium. There's also a crap ton of iron. The limited materials, I believe, are cobalt and nickel, which Tesla is working on getting rid of nickel and getting rid of cobalt entirely, but the 4680s still require quite a bit of nickel. But Elon is still expecting that 2/3 of all of our battery needs are going to be able to be sufficed by lithium iron phosphate. So Victor says, I live in the Bay Area, so I have a ton of options and prices are way better, but don't get me started on housing and taxes. I'd much rather pay for Starlink. Yeah. I know people who live in the Bay Area that have crappy internet and no one else to choose to. They just, once you live outside of, the immediate city limits, you can be in a real crappy spot for internet service. I know people in the Bay Area waiting for Starlink that pre-ordered it. But yeah, the price of just moving out of the Bay Area and buying a house in a cheaper cost of living area and just getting Starlink there, man, you could get a way nicer house. A mansion out where I live is a dump in the Bay Area. So that's why my advice for people who can work online potentially, some people can't do that. They need to go to a physical place to work. But if you can work online, I would highly encourage you not live in the high populated, fun areas like the Bay Area. They got all kinds of stuff you can do and check out. My goal, live somewhat outside of it so that you can drive there and back in a day, but you don't have to pay for the insane prices of the area. That's what me and my wife have done. Basically, we can go to the Bay Area and come back in a single day. It's a bit of a drive, but the drive is, even with a gas vehicle, is far cheaper than trying to live in the Bay Area. It's like the worst in the world in terms of cost of living. Certain cities, and specifically apartments and condos, have a Comcast monopoly. Yes, I lived in that area. Before Starlink was available, there was literally... That's where I am now, still, technically. There's no one else. Comcast is pretty much the only option, and I couldn't switch to anyone until the Starlink beta rolled around. Just imagine you could get a giant house and fill with crap and eat at Chili's on the weekend. What a life. Hey, I don't like your sarcasm. That sounds like a great life to me. I'll take a big house in the middle of nowhere with the Chili's I can go eat out at instead of living in a one-bedroom studio in the Bay Area eating top ramen. You spend a lot of time in your house these days. Come on, let's be honest. We all we're all watching YouTube. It's what you're doing now. You spend a lot of time at home. Doug says, I used to call Comcast support a fair amount for a while. Had good luck with Canadian tech support, maybe after initial Philippines, Indonesia, Belize person. Oh, interesting. I've never had a good story with Comcast. They told me there wasn't going to be a cancellation fee, and then I canceled, and there was a cancellation fee, and I did a whole video about that. It was terrible. Lithium is the oil of the 21st century. I don't think so, because I don't think the lack of lithium is what is holding up battery production. I think it's more nickel and cobalt. So maybe there's probably more ethically and environmentally ways of mining than there is drilling for oil. Do you think Apple or Tesla or SpaceX could ever make an Amazon Web Services competitor? They probably have the money to. They just don't see a point. I definitely don't see a point in SpaceX doing it. Apple maybe, but eat at Chili's too much and you might have a Taylosive moment. What is a Taylosive moment? I need to know more about this. 0.2 parts per million of lithium on the oceans. It would take a ton of ocean water filtration to get that lithium. Yeah, I'm sure it would. It's never that easy. Like I've seen the charts of like, here's how many solar panels you would need to power the entire planet, and they show it on a map of the United States, and they're like, it's real tiny. It's like, oh, that's not that hard. It's like, yeah, it's probably like $8 trillion worth of solar panels. So it's meant to prove the point that like it is possible, but the grand scheme of things, it's probably much harder. I don't know about the spring Vajtuli. I'm sorry. I wish I knew. There's buzzards flying around outside. Did somebody die? What the heck? What's going on? Okay. They must live in a rather inexpensive area of California. Yeah, definitely. Well, honestly, California is not terribly expensive as long as you don't live in LA or the Bay Area. Other than those two, it's all pretty reasonable. I mean, it's definitely not as cheap as a Nevada or as cheap as Kansas or Mississippi. I think Mississippi has some of the cheapest. Sometimes I'll go on Zillow and just look at houses in Mississippi, not because I want to live there, but just because it blows my mind how affordable you can get housing there. But you're also in Mississippi, so you pay in other ways, basically. Would you rather pay double for all your Apple No, come on, we're on EV. I'll go live on tech tomorrow. Don't ask Apple questions here. Oh, Dacia Spring has a 27.4 kilowatt hour battery. It's a nothing burger. Wait, is this a car you're asking about? It's the cheapest EV in Europe. You can buy it for about $12,000 with subsidies. Oh, San Diego. That's another city. Okay, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know much about the European market because I don't live there, but let me look this up. I'm curious. Wow. Let me take a look. Oh, of course, it's Renault. There's too many names. I can't keep track. 5-door hatchback. That looks nice. Yeah, 27 kilowatt hours. That can't be good. What's the range on that thing? Did they say? 100. Ooh. WLTP cycle. This one's overly generous, and it's 143 miles. So on the EPA, I bet it's like 100 miles. Well, it's cool. It's a good city car. I'm fine with that. I do not own an EV right now, mainly because I do not drive very much. On average, my wife and I drive about 5 miles a day. And if we did buy an EV, it would probably just sit in the garage for days at a time, which is partly why I'm super interested in the Aptera, because the idea is it can charge itself, use an extreme low amount of power per mile, and then when you leave it in the sun, which I live in a very sunny area, it's able to charge itself back up. So there would probably be times, if we had an Aptera, we'd be able to get like 100 miles of range, because there are sometimes we don't leave the house for like 3-4 days. You know, we buy our groceries, we get what we need to, and then we work. You know, we work all day from home, and then we hang out at home, and we work out at home, and we eat at home. So there's just sometimes, we got into quarantine mode, and cases are getting pretty bad here in California. So we're quarantining a bit more again. Not that we don't ever go places. We just usually try to stay at home for a while before we go out again. So we don't have one currently. But if I had to commute to work and I was driving a lot more regularly, I could definitely justify it. But for now, it would just be a fun toy. Let's see. Who do you think will make the first real 7-seat SUV that is not 100K VW? The R1S isn't 100K. It's a 70,000 for 7-seater. I would say it's a real 7-seat. Would you rather buy the Rivian R1S or Tesla Model X? Model X is really dang expensive, although I would rather have that. If I had to pick one or the other, I think I would take the Model X. But if I had to buy one or the other, I think I would take the R1S just because it's cheaper. Would you buy an Aptera? I don't know. I don't know if I'd get one right this second, but I might be in a very different situation by the time they're out. I'm watching them very, very closely because I think of all the EV startups that have yet to deliver a vehicle, that one I have the most interest in. I don't have a need in my personal life to really buy an R1T or an R1S. Definitely not a Lucid Air. So there's all these other EV startups that are kind of doing Tesla alternatives and stuff, and it's kind of cool. But I don't think I'd be that interested in an Arcimoto either. They're cool, but I don't want to have an open canopy like that, and I want to be able to have my wife sit right next to me. I don't want my wife behind me in the Arcimoto like that. So Aptera is perfect because most of the time me and my wife drive anywhere. It's just the two of us, and there are 4 or 5 days sometimes where we don't drive anywhere, so we could get that range back just from the sun, and it has a decent amount of cargo space in the back. Man, I love the Aptera. I'm just concerned about if they can get their vehicle to production and if they can hit the range numbers that they're promising, because I think it's probably a little too generous. But even if they don't hit the range figures, it's still amazing. You could cut the range by 30% across all of what Aptera says their range is going to be, and it would still be really good. Having a 600-mile EV for $35,000, that's insane. Would you prefer if Tesla brought back the Model Y Standard or Plaid Plus? Ooh. Why? ¿Por qué no both? Why not both? I want ¿Por qué no dos? Is that what I was trying to say? I don't remember. But standard range Model Y, I think, would make a bigger impact. I knew people in my personal life. I think my cousin was really interested in getting a Model Y, and he found out about the standard range Model Y earlier this year when it came out, and he was like, "Ooh, that sounds really great." And he was getting excited. He was saving up his money, and then they took it away, and he got really upset. He was like, he was gonna buy it, or I think he was going to, but I just know he was very, very frustrated when they took it away. He got upset about that. So I think standard range Model Y kind of helps Tesla accelerate the transition. Plaid Plus, I don't think it does that much. It's just okay, here's another fast Model S. Have we seen a fast Model S before? That happens to go over 500 miles on a charge. That's cool, but I don't think it would change much for the industry because it's still $150,000. What is an Aptera? Aptera is a San Diego startup EV company that's designing a three-wheeled, super hyper-efficient, super aerodynamic EV. I have them bookmarked, I think, here. Why is it? It's a weird... Google Chrome, you suck. It's not working. Why didn't it... Well, go to the website, please. I don't know what's wrong with Chrome. It never does that on Safari. Anyway, there's a link to them in my description because they have a referral code that you can use. If you decide to reserve one, you can get $30 off your reservation. So I just put that code in all my videos because, I'm a big Aptera fan and I want more people to know about them. But basically, they cover their vehicles with solar cells, and the idea is for you to be able to get around 40 miles of range per day just from the sun. So potentially you'd be able to just not even plug it in and you just let it charge every day from just a sunny climate. How long is the waiting list for new Cybertruck orders in Europe? Beyond 2024, right? Oh, yeah, easily. I don't think pickup truck sales are very high in Europe, so it's going to take them a while before they even consider making trucks over there. Probably beyond 2025, to be honest with you. I know the current specs of the Cybertruck would not do well in Europe, so they're going to have to, change it a lot to fit that demographic. What is your ideal EV range on a car? I mean, I don't know if I have an ideal range. Like, as long as you can get the price down, best range as possible. But I could live with pretty much anything over 200 miles. For my basic needs, I don't drive that often or very regularly, so that's why I'm a big fan of lithium iron phosphate, because it's like, as long as the range doesn't degrade very much, I don't need it to be super high personally. Like, if you do a better route planner and you look at how long it takes to take an EV on a big road trip, long range versus standard range doesn't actually make that big an impact. Like, I did a big road trip to my parents' place in a few states over a while back, and I was plugging in the different range options, and standard range took like 15 hours and long range took like 14 hours. So it's like an extra $10,000 and you save 1 hour on a road trip. So I don't actually think the time it takes to drive somewhere is a good reason to get a long range. I think the better reason to get a long range is to preserve your range over a longer period of time, because obviously your battery degrades. But if you're able to get a high cycle life iron phosphate standard range Model 3, and you know that range is 250, but it's going to stay 250, and you can charge it to 100% regularly, you're going to get 250 more often, then I'm fine with that personally. I mean, obviously, if they can get the price down and I can get a 1,000-mile range Aptera, which is their highest spec, for like $46,000, you can get 1,000 miles of range. I ponder myself if they're going to be able to hit that, but I'd like to see them try. It's the same thing with Elon. I don't think they're going to hit robotaxis within the next couple of years, but I'd love to see them try. Get as autonomous as you can, because I'll appreciate the features nonetheless. But yeah, it's the same thing with Aptera. It's like, I don't think they're going to hit 1,000 miles of range, but if they hit 700, that's still amazing. A 700-mile range on a $46,000 vehicle. You can only sit 2 people. I'll take that compromise. I don't have kids. I don't need people in the back seat. So I think they'll send it from Texas. About 600 miles for the ease of mind. Most gas cars don't go 600 miles. You don't want to drive. Having done a lot of road trips in my current gas car, I hate my current car, but it's what we have. I bought it in high school. I've had it for a while now. But it costs less than my computer I'm live streaming on right now. It's a very cheap car, but it can go like 470 miles on a full tank. I don't want to drive that long. That's why I'm not like a big advocate for getting super high range EVs. Like, it's good for people who want it. I think the 500-mile Cybertruck is great because there's going to be people who tow a lot, and that range is going to get cut in half. So it makes sense to have a high range on a pickup, and in the wintertime, your range takes a hit as well. But I've done road trips, and I drove that car, like over 400 miles without stopping. I was not enjoying myself. I was like, I want to take a break here. I want to like get out of the car, eat something, go to the restroom. Just driving that long nonstop, it's not super important to me. There's some people out there that are like, I got to drive as quickly as possible. I got to drive from, the West Coast to the East Coast in 4 days, and I got to get there as quickly as humanly possible. Like that type of thing, I'm like, I'll just take my time. I'd rather have a slower road trip if it's a more comfortable one. And I know if I was on autopilot and the car was doing most of the driving itself, I would be far more relaxed, and it would be far cheaper than paying for a gas car on a big road trip. That's going to cost you way more. So I would much rather have a slower road trip that saves me money, and the car does most of the driving personally. They would ship the Cybertruck from overseas. Would it make sense to reserve one now to lock in the price of FSD? If you don't mind just giving Tesla $100 now, then yeah, there's no terrible reason. If you want to lock in your FSD price, that's a good way to do it. But range isn't something that Tesla needs to work on. It's the charge time that EVs are still lacking in, hence why we either need more charging stations or reduce charge times. I think even the charge times isn't really the problem. The bigger problem is Tesla can't build their cars fast enough. This debate about getting the charge times better, it's like you're acting like we haven't convinced enough people to switch to electric. Currently, Tesla can't build enough cars for the people that already are convinced that they want to switch to electric. In their current state, the charge time, you can stop at most superchargers for 10, 15 minutes and be good to go until your next drive. You don't have to charge up to 100% at every supercharging stop. That's a misconception I think people have. Higher range EVs are needed for colder countries. You'd think that, but then Norway and all the northernmost countries are more electrified than the United States is. So they seem to live with cold EVs pretty comfortably. They don't have to drive as far as the other thing. EV charge times are already too fast. I can't finish my hamburger before the car's done on a road trip. Yeah, some people just want to get in and out and just do it like a gas station where you'd only need to charge for 5 minutes. But with an EV, you get the most amount of miles when you first start charging. For the first 5 to 50%, that goes a lot faster than the 50 to 80%. So when you plan out your trip on the Tesla, it just tells you exactly how long to stop at each station, and it does it in a pretty efficient amount of time. Only $100 still to reserve a Cybertruck, only $250 for existing fleet. Oh, right. Yeah, they raised the price, and it's not refundable. Would you rather have a Tesla Model Y with the same form factor and weight as now with 400-mile range, or a Tesla Model Y with 280 miles range but with a 450 kilo weight reduction? Weight doesn't make a huge difference to me. I don't know why that would impact. I don't use my car for performance or anything. So I'll take the 400-mile range, I guess. If they're the same price, I'll take the cheaper one if that's up for debate. The only reason why I want long range is so I don't need to leave the 20 to 80% zone. LFP sounds great. Yeah, I love that about it too. I hope they can improve the energy density quite a bit, because if you could just treat it more like a phone and you just always charge it up to 100% as much as you need. The traditional car makers haven't convinced their customers to switch to EV yet. Reducing charge times will convince a lot more people to become mainstream. Again, Marngel, that's assuming we haven't convinced enough people. The problem is we have convinced enough people. We can't make enough cars for the people that have convinced that EVs are the future and they want to buy one. That's why the delivery times are so booked out. But it's like Ford is getting a ton of orders with the F-150 Lightning. The Mach-E is high in demand. A lot of people still waiting on their ID4s. So I don't think the limiting factor is people aren't convinced if we can't make enough cars yet. That means the limiting factor is the batteries. But maybe if we can accelerate our battery supply chains and stuff, we'll get to the point where we need to convince more people. But I'm sure faster charging and all that's being worked on. Elon talked about they're working on 350 kilowatts already. So when that happens, you'll get much faster. You shouldn't charge your phone to 100% either all the time. Yeah, but you do it every night. You don't do that with a car. On a Tesla, you have to actively tell it to go to 100%. Your phone will go to 100% regardless. Yeah, Tesla is opening up supercharging to all vehicles. That's correct. But, anyway, I've been going longer than I was planning. But I appreciate all the questions. I had a lot of fun. I'd love to answer more, but yeah, expect me to do some more live streams moving forward. Again, if you missed some of the live stream and you want to listen to it back, you can listen to these streams on Spotify, and they will be coming to Apple Podcasts soon. So just look around for Tailosive EV streams in the next couple days. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.